Good afternoon. It's nice to see all of you here this afternoon. I'm Carlene Tyler, Director of Alumni and Constituent Relations. How was your holiday? Good?
So far, so good.
Okay. Today we have Professor Rod Gieselman here, and there's a question mark after that, and we've had some conversation already about what's fair and what's not. But we did have a call at the beginning of this week about this presentation, and they asked what documentation they should bring to the meeting. And I said, well, I don't think you need to worry about that. So anyway, let's welcome Rod, and we'll get on with the program this afternoon.
Thanks. Thank you. I've been at McPherson College for 13 years now. Teach primarily finance courses, also some economics, a little bit of accounting. So, have you noticed there's an election going on? Yeah. You can't turn on the television or the radio without hearing the politicians talking, right? And one of the hot topics is how they would change the tax system to make it more fair, right? So that's what I want to talk about. Here's a couple quotes. My plan, make Wall Street banks and the ultra-rich pay their fair share of taxes. That's Bernie Sanders. We're going to be reducing taxes for the middle class, but for the hedge fund guys, they're going to be paying up, Donald Trump. We've got to get back to having those with the most contribute to this country, Hillary Clinton. And then everybody should pay the same proportion of what they make. You make $10 billion, you pay $1 billion. You make $10, you pay $1. You get the same rights and privileges. I don't see how anything gets a whole lot fairer than that, Ben Carson. So they all have their own ideas on how they can make the tax system more fair, right? So my plan is, I want to talk about the types of taxes that we face and various tax systems. And yeah, caveat, I'm not an expert at preparing taxes, okay? I pay somebody downtown to do my taxes. I want to look at this from the macro viewpoint, from the economic standpoint, big picture. I also hope that I don't convey any particular political stance. I'm trying to present facts and encourage discussion and discourse and thought. We're going to look at some stats on the way the current tax systems work, both federal and Kansas. And then at the end, you're going to design our new fair tax system. Okay, taxes we pay: income tax, federal and state, capital gains tax, FICA, which is Social Security, 6.2% on all earnings, plus the employer puts in 6.2%, Medicare, sales tax, excise taxes, property taxes. Yeah, that's a lot, kind of a depressing list, isn't it? Okay, in economics, we break tax systems down into three broad categories. The first is a proportional tax, also known as a flat tax. And in a proportional tax, regardless of how much you make, you pay the same percentage. So just some numbers I've made up. Somebody making $40,000 pays 20% income tax. Somebody making $100,000 pays 20%. Somebody making $400,000 pays 20%. That's proportional. You could make an argument for that being fair, right? Everybody's paying the same proportion. The next form is a progressive tax, where the more you make, the higher the percentage of your income you pay. So in this case, somebody making $40,000 would pay 15%, somebody making $100,000, 25%, somebody making $400,000 would pay 35%. Again, these aren't exact numbers. They do kind of follow the way our current tax system works. What are the arguments in favor of a progressive tax system?
That is fair.
Okay. Okay, why? Why is it viewed as fair?
Well, I'm just saying this is what people say. But,
Ability to pay.
yeah,
Okay. Those who can pay more pay more.
yeah.
I have a question though.
Yes.
Those that can pay more, sometimes they have bigger deductions in other situations to where they actually end up not paying as much as like 35%. Where the individual that makes 40 or less, they don't have those benefits to be able to have deductions.
Okay. Yes. So your point is the system may be designed to be progressive, but does it necessarily work that way? And we're going to look at that.
Well, and if you're giving a lot to a certain donation or cause, why, that gives you some credits
Yes.
of your taxes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which that seems fair to me if they're doing a worthy thing.
Okay. Do we have any arguments against the progressive system? Anyone want administration of it? Okay, it's complicated. Anybody else see a reason why somebody might say that's not fair?
Well, a lot of people do say it's not fair.
Okay, what's the argument on that?
For arguments, but, well, they worked hard, they made it, they ought to be able to keep it.
There we go. Right, that's the argument against it, is that you're penalizing success. People went out, got an education, they got a good job, and therefore they make more money, so why should they have to pay a larger portion? Okay? And then the last form is a regressive tax, where the more you make, the lower the percentage of your income you pay in tax. So in this case, somebody making $40,000 might pay 35%, somebody making $100,000, 25%, and somebody making $400,000, 15%. Does this sound fair? You cannot come up with a rational argument to support this, can you? This is...
The argument to support it would be the actual amounts. The amounts would look more.
Okay, so even though the person making $400,000 is paying a lower percentage, they're still putting in potentially more dollars.
The amounts are more even, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not supporting
But it doesn't feel very good, does it?
it, I'm just saying that would be the argument.
Yeah. I think naturally we don't think that one feels very good. Okay, federal income tax system. Is it progressive, proportional, or regressive? Slightly progressive. Now we have the issue of the tax deductions and everything, so it's designed to be progressive. The more you make, the rate goes up. Does it actually end up being progressive?
Not necessarily.
Okay, now I'm sorry to put eye charts up here. I know, but I'm a numbers guy, so bear with me. I'll try to simplify it. This is data directly from the IRS website, where I went out and could find by income group how much income tax they paid the government relative to their income. So this is hard data. And what I have is the poorest people are at the bottom, the lowest income people are at the bottom. Whoa, that is not right. There we go. So poorest people are at the bottom, and then the highest income people, the richest, are at the top. And the bar represents the percentage of their income that they paid in federal income tax. So what this shows is until you get to the very top levels, and this is people making more than $10 million a year. That's a big number. And I figured it out, it's like 1 in every 5,000 people. So it's not a big group. But the federal income tax system is, in fact, progressive. except for at the highest levels. And I think what's happening at the highest levels is those people tend to have lots of investments, and therefore they have more capital gains, which is taxed for those people at 20%. So that's going to bring down the total that they pay in. But overall, our federal income tax system is in fact progressive. And I think that's a widely held misconception that the rich guys can get away with all these deductions and they don't pay more. They do. You've probably seen this data, and I don't want to belabor it too much, but what this shows, for the poorest 20% of our population, people making less than $24,000 a year, they made 4.5% of all of the income in the United States. So the bottom 20% made 4.5% of the income. They paid minus 2.2% of the federal income tax that the government collected. How can it be minus? Well, you have things like the earned income tax credit, where the poor can actually receive tax refunds larger than the tax that they paid in. So that's what you have going on there. Now, if you jump down the list, the top 20%, which is households making more than $134,000 a year, that's a big number, but it's not huge. And again, that's a household. So if you have two incomes, that's both. So, you know, that includes a lot of middle-class families. That 20% made 50% of all of the income earned, and they paid 89% of all of the federal income tax that the government collected. And to break it down one step further, the top 1%, which is our people or households making more than $615,000, they produce 17% of all the income. They paid 46% of all of the federal income tax collected. So 1% paid 46% of the federal income tax. Now, a couple things. One, my first point here of this is that the federal income tax system is in fact progressive. Okay? My second point, I'm not trying to put forth a political viewpoint, but for the politicians that say the rich need to be paying more, then what they are saying is that they want the system to be even more progressive, right? And in the case of a Bernie Sanders, he will come right out and say that. He wants to increase how progressive the tax system is. So that's a valid viewpoint. Okay, now let's jump to the state level, state and local. Sales tax. What do you think? Is that progressive, proportional, or regressive? Regressive. Why do you say that?
Because it would take a bigger percentage of the poorer people's income than that of the rich.
Yeah. So here's an example. Again, numbers I just made up. Let's say a poor person makes $40,000 a year. How much of that are they going to spend in a year? Probably all of it, right? If you only make $40,000, you're spending all $40,000. And so you're going to pay sales tax, 8%, it's a number I picked just to make it even, on that $40,000, which is $3,200, which out of their income is 8%. Somebody making $400,000, how much of that are they going to spend in a year? Not all of it, right? If you're making $400,000, you're probably saving a chunk of your income. So just for the sake of argument, let's assume that that person making $400,000 spends $300,000 of it. Well, they're going to pay 8% sales tax on that, which is going to be $24,000 in sales tax. If you compare that to what they made, effectively they're only paying 6% of their income in sales tax. So that makes it regressive. Let's move on. Excise taxes. This is state of Kansas. We pay 24 cents per gallon in tax to the state of Kansas for gas. There's another 18 cents on there for federal tax. When the price of gas is only $1.70, that's a pretty big percentage, isn't it? Cell phones, state of Kansas collects $13.34 per phone on a phone plan. Then we have cigarettes, 79 cents for every 20 cigarettes. Liquor, $2.50 of tax for every gallon. I don't buy it by the gallon, but wine, 30 cents per gallon, and beer, 18 cents per gallon.
And also all your utilities that you use, you pay taxes on that too.
Yeah, there are taxes on that. I guess those usually aren't included in the excise tax.
But we're again taxed on all our utilities.
Yeah.
It usually doesn't show up on,
Isn't this great?
yeah.
Yeah.
So they leave out that part.
Yeah, my stats don't include that,
Yeah,
so.
most of them don't. And we have to pay it. I mean, we pay, and it's big on our utilities.
Yep.
taxes.
These last four are commonly lumped together as sin taxes, right? You've heard that term? So what do you think? Are these going to be regressive, proportional, progressive? So the guy working out at Pfizer or Hospira or Sterling, whatever you want to call it, right? So the guy working on the line making $50,000 a year, he has to drive his car to work, right? And then the boss out there who makes, I don't know what, $500,000 a year, he has to drive his car to work. Does the wealthy guy consume a lot more gas to get to work? No, he doesn't. And his cell phone, they probably both have a cell phone, right? But to the wealthy person, that $13 of tax is a lot lower impact than the person making $40,000. So that is regressive. The sin taxes are even worse because statistically, the lower income groups tend to smoke and drink more. Just a fact. Yeah, one of the biggest determinants of smoking is income. One of the biggest correlations. Now, I kind of get a kick out of it. The one exception to that is beer. Because what they find is that when people make more money, they just buy more expensive beer. So it becomes kind of proportional with beer. But for the rest of them, it's regressive. Yes?
Wealthy people buy a lot of alcohol and liquor and wine and beer. So I don't see where the poor buys more than the wealthy. I don't see that.
Statistics.
Well, I mean, how much they spend relative to their income, but then also, statistically, the lower income groups are consuming more alcohol and smoking more. Just a fact, yeah. So, gas and cell phone taxes are going to be regressive. Sin taxes tend to be highly regressive. So, this is data, a study done specifically on the state of Kansas, okay? Which I think is pretty neat that I can find data on Kansas. And here again, like I did previously, the bottom of the chart are the poorest people, and then you move up the income scale from there. The bottom 20% pay 7.9% of their income in sales and excise taxes. As you move up the chart, it gets less and less. So the top 1% are only paying 1% of their income in sales and excise tax. That is extremely regressive. And a little bit ago we said, how can you justify a regressive tax system, right? That makes no sense. And yet, look at how regressive this very significant tax is that we live with every day. So this is not political, but I will say, I don't like sales tax. This is not right. Property taxes. What do you think? Progressive, proportional, regressive? Proportional? Regressive? So, yeah, the person who makes $40,000 a year, they own a house, right? The person who makes $400,000 a year, does he live in a bigger house? Probably. Is his house 10 times bigger? Probably not. And by the way, these stats do include if you rent, it's assuming you are paying the property taxes on that apartment through your rent. Okay? Which I think is accurate. So that's included in here. So again, for the state of Kansas, the bottom 20% are paying 3.7% of their income in property taxes. And as you move up the scale, it's not nice and pretty, but generally it's a pretty regressive tax as well. And again, I think it comes to, while the wealthy live in a bigger house, it's not proportionally bigger. FICA taxes, Social Security, 6.2% of your wages. That sound proportional? How many of you are aware that there is a cap on Social Security withholdings? Yeah, $117,000. Once your earnings get to $117,000, your FICA contribution falls to zero. So, if we take a poor person, earns $40,000, they're getting taxed at 6.2% on all $40,000. That person making $400,000 only pays FICA on the first $117,000. So for them, the FICA tax is 1.8% of their total income. Now, the argument here is there are limits on how much you can receive from Social Security in retirement, right? So we shouldn't have unlimited paying in when you're limited on what you can get out. On the other hand, the poor do withdraw a larger proportion of what they put in than the wealthier people do. There is some income redistribution built into the Social Security system. So to that extent, you could argue against this cap. Depends on your view. And here again, Bernie Sanders says he'd get rid of this cap. But certainly the existence of the cap does make FICA a regressive tax system. Okay, changing gears a little bit. Have you heard of a VAT tax? Value added tax. We don't have a value added tax today, but there's a whole lot of talk about it. Two of the candidates, Ted Cruz, he calls it a business flat tax, and Rand Paul calls it a business transfer tax. What they're really talking about, though, is a VAT tax. So a VAT tax is like a sales tax, except as the product goes through production, the tax is assessed on value that is being added to the product as it is being built. And the tax is then paid by the business. By the time it gets to you and me, that tax is built into the price of the good. Okay? So it is, in my opinion, just a more complicated form of a sales tax. But it is a tax on consumption, and therefore it will hit the poor to a greater degree than it will the rich. European countries get the majority of their tax revenue from VAT taxes, even more than income tax. European countries rely on it very heavily. Any questions on this so far? Yeah.
On your Social Security tax, though you receive it, if you're up at a certain level, you have to pay tax on it.
Yes. So your Social Security earnings are taxed at a certain level. Yeah.
So that would make it a little less regressive, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All righty. You have been appointed king. You are king for a day. So amongst your tables, I want you folks to discuss how would you make our tax system more fair? And isn't that a weighted term, fair? Right? So in your discussion, I want you to include, do you have an income tax? Is it proportional or progressive? And then if you say progressive, you can't just get off the hook and say progressive because that's really vague. You need to say, are you going to make it more progressive than what it is today? Or less progressive? Or keep it the same? And what about sales tax, property tax, VAT tax? Or are there any other changes that you can come up with to make this more fair? Okay, are you guys ready to go? I know this might be a little contentious. You might not agree with everybody at your table, but let's spend some time discussing this, and then we'll see what you come up with. All right, so who's going to win the primary here? You want to? It would be fun to be king, wouldn't it? Yeah.
You want to know what I'd do if I was king?
What's that?
I would hold the taxes just like they are for everyone. I wouldn't do a thing with the taxes. I would make the government for 1 year be responsible and figure out how to spend their money wisely and quit taking from the people that pay taxes. And then if we do have to go back into paying a certain amount of taxes, instead of always raising taxes, we should be able to lower it if the government and state is responsible with what they're doing with the money when they get it. Then we wouldn't be overcharged in taxes while they can waste it. I think that's where our biggest problem is.
The brown bag cut taxes and look where we
I'm
are.
not talking about people, I'm just talking about the government in general, in the state in
But that's
general.
what he did, and it didn't work, I'm sorry.
Work throughout, the U.S.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, the federal government does spend right now $1 trillion more every year than what it collects.
Yeah, they
$1 trillion with a T.
they're wasting
Yeah.
it too. So I would like to be king.
Okay, what else do we have? What'd you come up with?
We take the tax on.
Pardon?
Remove the sales tax.
Remove the sales tax on groceries. Yeah. Good. And medicine. Yes. A lot of states do exempt groceries from the sales tax. Kansas doesn't. And so this site that I was using that gave me the stats on Kansas, they provide those states provide those stats for every state. They ranked Kansas the 9th worst state in terms of how fair their tax policy is, and that's a big part of it. I agree. But then then it gets sticky too. What about clothes?
Pennsylvania doesn't want tax clothes.
Pardon?
Pennsylvania taxes either clothes or food.
Okay. So clothes are a necessity. They can also be a luxury, right? So
What makes our tax system low? I mean, low on the list. What?
how regressive it is, and that the sales and excise taxes being the primary driver of that.
And who's governing?
Pardon?
And who's governing?
Well, yeah. Yeah, certainly he's pushed things that direction, right?
Well, I haven't heard anybody say this, I would probably progressive tax.
Okay? Doris would make the income tax system more progressive than what it is.
And we did talk about the grocery tax and that kind of thing too, so.
Yeah. A couple of the a couple of the politicians that are talking about a flat tax, proportional tax. The one proposal by Rubio starts out by saying anybody at 150% of poverty or less. So roughly, anybody at 35,000 or less, zero. And then they'd start collecting from there. So, yeah, it seems like there would be some ways to make it somewhat less burdensome on the low income. Yes?
If you do that, are you encouraging people to try to stay below that level then?
That's a valid point, right?
You know, the only one thing I could see on the regressive, when you turned it around and had the lower income paying in a higher percent, it gives you an incentive to get above that. Would be the only thing I could.
Yes, and when if you were to lower the burden on low income, you do potentially create a disincentive to earn.
The flat tax has been an issue for the last at least 3 to 4 decades. And it's a good idea, but how do you compare somebody that is 100% wage earner to a self-employed individual? What are we going to tax the self-employed individual? Are we going to tax him on his total income, pretty much like the total income of the wage earner? Or are we going to tax him on his total income less his reasonable deductions? Now, what's reasonable deductions and what?
Yeah.
So you can't get away necessarily the flat tax, and I think that's part of the reason the flat tax never came in since I've been involved with preparing tax returns.
Yeah, the deductions is a whole another sticky topic, right? And a lot of the proposals say, let's just simplify it and get rid of the deductions. But then you have charitable contributions. That seems like a pretty legit, something you want to encourage, right?
But and a lot of what they have been doing over the years is keeping the charitable contributions in, but there is talk of even limiting that to a certain degree. They're starting to take out a lot of the other deductions and even mortgage interest that are dealing with.
Just quickly, on the flat tax, Ben Carson just came out with some more detail on his tax proposal, and he's proposing a flat tax at 14.9%. When I look at these numbers, the rates being paid by a huge portion, I don't see how 15% tax across the board replaces those numbers. So a flat tax could work, but I'm not sure what the number would be. And to me, it seems like it would be more than 14.9%. Yeah, at first he framed it in terms of tithing.
And people were saying, but that doesn't take the place of it, so then they went up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, tithing, sure, for him.
Yeah.
Tithing,
So,
brings
yeah.
up the credits.
I think I would work on beefing up IRS. There's an awful lot of income that's not reported.
Okay.
And I think I would, and I think we've had these people say, well, IRS needs to be nice. I don't think IRS needs to be nice. I think you need to be fair. When they're nice, then we say, well, I don't, no sweat. And I remember when I got audited many years ago, I didn't have to, all I had to do was go and mess around and find my stuff and go to Salina and take care of it. And then when I got back home, they wanted me to tell the people at the coffee that I got audited. And, so that, if you're thinking about cheating, why, maybe you ought to consider you might get audited too. So, it seemed like we could beef up IRS to say, go after subterranean, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Income.
The underground.
Yeah.
I read an estimate that 10% of our economy's activity is unreported. 10%. That would be a big number.
Is what he's talking about also what we call the offshore money that's out of country, but other people are getting money, like in the Caymans and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
also those that are not paid, you talked about the IRS being fair, collecting, well, every once in a while we read something in the paper about this much is outstanding, but, well, maybe people need to go over the money that hasn't been paid.
Yeah. And then we could also get into the whole topic of tax inversions, right? Where companies move to another country to pay less tax. But I'd put it to you this way. Do you know anybody who retired in Florida? And why did they retire in Florida? Because taxes are lower. So do you blame a company for that?
Some people carrying out-of-state tags on their cars because it's a lot lower than tags in Kansas.
Yep. I have a daughter going to college in Pennsylvania, and that car is going to have a Kansas tag on it for as long as possible, right? So, any other ideas on how to fix this? Do you feel a little bit worse about sales tax and property tax? If there's any agenda I have, it's that. I really dislike sales and property tax. Income tax, I think, is the most fair system we have. How progressive, whether it should be progressive and how progressive it should be, is wide open for debate, right? That is a valid question. Yeah.
Aspect of property tax, as being from a farm background, we had landlords who lived out of state, we farmed their land, they had to pay property tax on it. They could not vote the property tax money went to support schools and other things. They couldn't even vote on the people who were on the school board because it was taxation without representation.
Yeah. And that's another whole topic where farmers are paying property tax on their means of production, which is, you could argue, is more burdensome than what other businesses face. I have a father-in-law who will talk your ear off on that one.
You're never sure of your income,
Yeah.
but you are sure of your property tax.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
One of the things on a sales tax, and being that inside the city limits, we have 2 half-cent sales tax.
Yes.
In McPherson County, there's another half-cent sales tax that goes to support 3 of the hospitals in the county. Part of that sales tax, a lot of the McPherson city sales tax is paid by people other than the residents of McPherson. And over the last several years, and I remember hearing a comment about that we need to be holding the government accountable and make sure they're spending it correctly. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I've worked for the city now for 4 years. And I have a little different aspect on the care and contemplation and decision-making that goes into whether we spend money here or there. And I've got a whole lot different appreciation for that than what I had prior to 4 years ago.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that I don't have the same apprehension that most of you probably have for our state and local and federal governments. But as far as the sales tax, here we've gone and we've paid for the water park that was done about 14, 15 years ago. We expanded and renovated the library. Also, money went to help to pay down some of the debt on the Opera House. More money went to redo the needed First Street. And there's, in looking into the future, there's that particular sales tax. There's avenues of, like the community building is looking in the future of having some renovation done to it. A lot of that is done by a sales tax.
Yep.
And the percentage that's paid by the local residents as opposed to having the other people come in is lower than what it would be if we did it on a property tax. and did those improvements on a property tax, then everybody living in here would be paying for that.
Yeah, I struggle with that half-cent sales tax, because when I came to town, it was the water park, and then it went to the library, and then to the opera house, and then to street and sidewalk improvements. And I struggle because on the negative side, once you give a government a tax, they're never going to stop taking it. You know, soon as that project's done, they will go to the community center, and then they will move on to the next project. On the other hand, I really love our library and the opera house and the water park, you know, so I struggle, yeah.
Every time one went to the next, that had to be voted upon by the contingency. And it was passed each time. And if it gets to the point of whatever the next project, if there is a next project, it can be voted down too.
Yeah.
What percentage of sales tax in McPherson comes from out of the city?
I wish I knew that.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting number to have, wouldn't it?
But
The question is, out of the sales tax collected in McPherson, how much of it is people passing through McPherson versus McPherson residents?
But with part of that sales tax, if we didn't have that sales tax in the city of McPherson to be able to do those things, then we would have to be using ad valorem tax dollars to do that. And in order to do that, you would have to increase the mills. And as I was sharing at the table here, over the last 6 or 7 years, the mill for the city portion of your levy has only fluctuated less than 0.5% one way or another.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's very many cities in the state of Kansas that can say that.
Yeah.
And the benefit, a lot of the reason of that is because of the contingency of the voters to be allowing for the state, or the half-cent sales tax.
Yeah. I was going to say, you know, the federal authorities have a variety of tax systems that they can get money from. The state can use income tax or sales tax, etc. The local government really has two choices, right? Sales tax or property tax. Their hands are tied. It's one of those two.
And then we keep, you know, as the state gets short on funding like they have been, and a lot of that is due to the change of the income tax that they had over the last few years. And whether you're for that or against that doesn't matter. What the intent was to get more people to move into Kansas so we'd have more people to tax. But I don't think that's necessarily worked out the way they planned on that. But as they're running short, and then there's different things that have to be done in the local, whether it's school district, county, or city.
It rolls downhill.
That's pushed down. Now, you're supposed to do that, and good luck with any funding to do that.
Yeah.
One thing that's definitely is on the horizon too is stormwater. And we all know what happened to Lynchburg just a couple years ago, more or less. Stormwater here, we're having to track that and monitor that stormwater on the contamination as it comes into the city and then as it goes out. And we're having to do that and then also try to take care of different areas of the stormwater that we don't have a situation like that.
Yeah.
And that takes dollars too, but you know, there's no funding coming down for that.
Right. Okay. I think we need to wrap up. So thank you for your attention. It was fun.